Okay, hello, beautiful world. It's episode 36 of Outrageously Evolving podcast that Centaur and I started back in May of this year. So it's been fun and exciting to do all this. And this is the wonderful Suzette Clough, who is an amazing artist. And I just want to read a quote from you if I get it exactly right. You can correct me if you'd like to. So on your website, it says, painting is my spirit practice. It is the alchemical lens that connects me with my own inner nature and with a subtle kinship with earth, big nature, and the multiverse of invisible worlds. Ooh, gives me chills. Because that's my thing too. That's where I write from, and I see that's where you paint from, is the connection to the invisible stuff. I think that's where genius comes from. And we were just talking about creative intelligence. So over to you. I'll let you introduce yourself and say a little bit about that.
Thank you. I mean, thanks, Solara, so much. I also feel very kind of tingly from that quote as well. And I think there's something also like when, as an artist, or I really describe myself more as a painter actually, but when we step into that place of a relationship with the invisible, something else happens.
Yeah.
And I consider my work now and everything that I do in terms of working with other people is that it's not that I dissolve, I'm more and more myself, but there's
Yes.
something about opening the portal for a relationship with the invisible world that when I became more aware of what actually was sort of spinning through my work, when that became more present, the breadth of it and the width of it completely expanded.
Yeah.
And that's where I find myself. And I've been painting since I was 12, so 54 years.
Wow.
And I mean, it's the longest practice other than breathing and eating that I've had my whole life, that
Oh,
it continues to be my compass and my map. And yeah, and that's where I find myself kind of longing to step into those worlds and to receive more and more communications from
yeah.
those
I liked
entities.
what you said about it is you, because I used to do what would be called channeling things through, and it wasn't really me. It didn't feel like me. But
Yes.
now it's me and the creative intelligence of the universe or nature or earth is what you do. So would you say it's similar for you?
Absolutely, because I think that's a little bit like there's my experience too, that there was something about having to be good or having to be different or cleaned up, and that actually the kind of work that I do now is much more around like being more and more present to all of myself, which then is a kind of paradoxical and mirror relationship to allowing more and more of that intelligence to be present and come through me.
Yes.
And there's something about this kind of deep mirror neuron kind of creative relationship that we have with the living entity of, the world, that is not asking us to be better,
Yeah.
it's asking us to be more, which is
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
yeah.
Like I just wrote a piece this morning that says exactly that. Let me see if I can just find it here because it said exactly that about becoming more. So hang on, I'll just read you the first sentence.
Mm.
Once you make a relationship with nature, the stars, and the universe, something shifts inside you and you become something more than you were originally designed to be.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And there's something about that shifting, which is really paradoxical. It's both you're shifting to the side, but you're also shifting to open.
Yeah.
And so it's both kind of decentering, being the human in control, but also recentering to be completely to open to sort of don't know. It's not the control of the universe; it's a relationship with the universe, and
Yes.
there's so much learning to be had in that.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
yeah, like so much, not kind of not making oneself less in the face of that relationship,
Yeah.
but also being aware of the awesomeness. Like it's so many fractals in one experiencing. Yeah, yeah,
Beautifully said. Yeah, that's exactly it. It is like that. It's like you engage in that relationship with something which many people would consider invisible, the creative
mm,
intelligence of the universe, earth, nature, whatever. And then you become more of that and more of yourself at the same time in a kind of awestruck state.
yes, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's
and yeah, and something about that that kind of that sort of weaving being woven.
yeah,
So doer and being done to, but it's like a creative re-referencing of yourself.
yeah,
Um, that I also think is kind of like a transmission that when you step into that, um, also that we are transmitting some of that intelligence and that knowing
yeah,
back into the world, however we, however we're choosing to do that, and not even choosing, it just happens, I think.
yeah. Were you born that way with this
Um,
relationship?
it's really interesting. When I look back now, I think I was born in communication, and I think that a lot of my kind of unlearning as I've grown older is re-remembering certain sensitivities that
Yeah.
I had. Like, I remember I'm Australian, and I grew up in one of the places I grew up in was Sydney, in a very kind of then very out of the way part of Sydney.
Yeah.
And down the bottom of our road was this huge piece of real wild bush. And there was a huge, huge rock that used to kind of dominate a tiny corner of the bush. But it felt to me as a child, it was like I felt like I should get down and pray to it, not
Wow.
because I felt at ease with it. It was so awesome. It
Yeah.
felt like it was holding stories that I think it's only as I've grown older that I feel like I am sort of able to hold that level of energy and allow it to pass through me and decode it onto the canvas or the paper or into words.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Well, I think you call your current paintings by earthworks, yes? Do you want to
Yes,
say
yes,
something about that? Because really, what we're talking about, I guess another way to talk about it is the genius flow that comes from both yourself and this relationship with a different kind of creative intelligence. So yeah, tell
yes,
us about earthworks.
yeah. Well, Earthworks is a body of work I've been working on for about 40 years. And it's the paintings range in size from handheld paintings to kind of 3 or 4 meter paintings across by 2.5 meters wide,
Like the
tall.
one behind you on the wall?
That's a small painting, but yes, something like that. Sort of that, and the earthworks is a kind of form of transmission, and it's a little bit like that stone I was telling you about, the rock I was telling you about. That they feel to be like they're codes that come through me onto the canvas, um, and I think one of the things about being a painter, an artist, really is that part of what I see as my work is being able to receive those codes, and
Yeah,
that that takes a lot of skill
yeah,
because they're such big codes,
yeah,
um, and that's yeah. So it's like downloading and working with and dancing with and skillfully using the material world, because you also have to have a working knowledge of how paints and pigments,
yes,
beeswax, all kind of work together.
yeah,
So that's an apprenticeship that takes a long time. The material world has different rules,
yeah,
but the languaging is something I think we are born with,
yeah,
and that what we're what we're kind of having to come back into relationship with is how do we listen to that inside, but how do we listen to it in the world,
yeah.
body of the world.
That's beautiful. In a way, it sounds like you're describing a kind of a sacred relationship with communion
Mhm.
that you translate into worldly gifts or contributions, you could say.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And those paintings, I mean, they're also they're conversations with these pattern, like I call them the pattern creation ancestors. And
Ah,
they're kind of like the originating ancestors of the body of the world. And they come through in very particular um, sort of forms. And how they come through is that you have to leave a lot of space for them, but you also have to be very active in engaging them and calling them forward.
yeah.
Um, and they sort of have they're kind of like formational patterns. And I think one of the reasons why they're appearing now, and you see them very often in very kind of indigenous,
Mhm.
kind of very early artwork on caves, or in indigenous traditions like Aboriginal traditions or Mesoamerican traditions, that these patterns are not just they're not just decorations. They're actually living bodies of knowledge,
Yes.
and those are the same bodies that sit in the cellular body of the world and our body.
Wow.
And I think that's they're reappearing because what I've sort of found my way to sort of listening to is that I think they're coming through because these are the languages we've forgotten.
Ah,
And
beautiful.
these are the languages that are reappearing because they're ways of kind of recalibrating our own nervous systems.
Yeah, beautiful. Have you, I know you paint it. Have you ever put it into like written form? So you, or do you teach people about this at all?
I do teach a lot about this, and I developed a body of work that I call visual medicine, and that's sort of let me see. This it's the paintings are much smaller, and they're extremely accessible, and um, they're made through just dipping wet watercolor paper into uh, acrylic paint. And they're not about making beautiful images. They are about receiving communications.
Right.
And these pattern creation ancestors are actually very accessible to us, and they have a kind of essential nature where their gift to us is to communicate essential conversations that are never directive, but very opening, often to our original patterns.
And what do you think the purpose is of all that?
I think the purpose of this is to see that we are part of creation,
Yeah.
uh, and that when we calibrate to that kind of resonance field, that something happens in our nervous system, something happens in how we see
Yeah.
and how we feel, um, and that we become much more ecologically combinable.
Yeah.
Like, we sort of feel ourselves connected to trees, we feel ourselves connected to others, including people. um, and I think it makes us more kind of generative and operative in the world as beings.
Yeah.
um, I think that we find out things, that we heal dimensions that go back, way, way, way back, and way, way, way forward.
Mm.
Like, I hope these kind of attuning to these original patterns inside of us can really heal us in future generations. Uh,
Beautiful. Yeah. Do you also think it's because when I get these or anything like that, I feel like they're openings for the creation of a future that may not currently exist.
yes,
And
absolutely.
and it reconnects us, as you said, and it expands us and enriches us and evolves us into something more, I think.
Yeah.
You know, it was a great surprise to me to discover that there was an intelligence beyond the brain. Because unlike
Yeah.
you, I didn't have it when I was a kid. And
Mm,
even as a young adult, I discovered it when I was in my mid to late 40s.
wow.
So,
That's yeah. I think that I left school when I was 16, and I had a psychotic breakdown when I was 21.
um,
And I think that I've sort of reflected quite a lot on, I think the kind of way that I was seeing did not fit in a schooling system.
Yeah.
So I felt like and I think I grew up feeling like I didn't really fit anywhere.
Oh, I know so many people who say that, and
Yeah,
so many
yeah,
kids too
yeah,
today who would say that
yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also a mark often of creative intelligence, that you feel you're not fitting into existing systems.
Yes.
So in a way that, and I mean, I work with many people who that is the hallmark of, how people gather in groups, or the groups that I run anyway,
Yeah.
that sense of not belonging. And how do we sort of establish an intimacy? How do we create an intimacy with ourselves, with Earth, with others,
Yeah.
with the many multiple kingdoms that we actually are connected to?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
It isn't, I know that that isn't necessarily something new. It is new for me, but it isn't new
Yes.
for the
Yeah.
world. But to return to a relationship with the miraculousness of the natural world and animals and even water. I don't know if you followed Veda Austin's
Yes,
work
I
on
do.
water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about intelligence of
Yes.
something you wouldn't think had intelligence, but it
Yeah.
does. It's just another practical example of the various intelligences that surround us
Mm.
that we're not
Yes.
aware of.
Yeah.
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 And I find for me, the more I've engaged with this invisible intelligence, the more, I don't want to say the more intelligent I become, but the more brilliant I seem to become, the more I have greater understanding, the more I am able to influence the matrix of reality and the world and life and where we're heading, kind of thing. Do you find the same thing?
Um, I think it's really, I think it's really interesting. I think that, sort of, I feel like I'm in a very deep learning phase again at the moment.
Mm.
Um, and I feel, and what do I feel about that? I think it's true. And I think that one of the kind of intelligences that I think I am being schooled in is to do with apprehension, and it's different than comprehension.
Yeah.
It's like apprehension is the capacity to see and see between worlds. This is how I see it anyway.
Yeah.
See between worlds and beyond worlds, and I think one of the skills that, being a painter, and what I teach about, is that I can see that when people change, their perception is changed, but through this practice of receiving information,
Yeah.
and actually having to work like quite hard to dissolve the introjects, the psychic introjects around. How could we know that? I'm sure that person, that being's not communicating with you. I'm making it up.
Yeah.
All of that, dissolving that interface, and they're very deep patterns in our psyche. So when they start to dissolve, what we begin to be in touch with, I think, is this quality, this capacity of apprehension. And so it's like prehension, where you see things that are going to happen, or or could happen, or apprehension, where you see in between worlds. And I think it changes people's relationship with themselves profoundly. Like,
Mm.
it's like hard to describe why seeing and looking and gazing and experiencing changes us so radically. But my own sense of it is it softens our relationship to the living world. Like, we actually see it as living. We
Yeah.
actually see it as being alive, and we see it as a relational matrix that we
Yes.
are part of. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
and that then means that, and then the other portals open, where we can, kind of open ancestor portals, and sort of ancestors in the future portals, or and so I think that there's something very kind of alive, and even trying to talk about it is like wildly crazy. It's like your brain starts exploding, and
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Brilliant. Because I know everybody who watches my podcast will completely get what, what you're
yes,
talking about.
Yeah.
But I do know there are people in the world who would go, what? What are you talking about?
Yes.
And I think that one of the things that, well, because I went from not that to this over a period of time.
Mhm.
And I think that one of the things that really helped was to start to trust the signals and signs that I
Mm.
was receiving and believe in them. The more I believed in them, the more I trusted them, the more I accepted them, the easier my life got, the more powerful I became as a creator, as an alchemical creator, that kind of thing. The
Yes.
more genius flowed
Yes.
through me. So it has
Yes.
proven out that it was a great thing to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
to start that process and to be able to look into those places and commune with them.
Yes. And that I think it's really interesting what you're saying, because you asked me about this body of work called Earthworks, and I've recently just been engaged or kind of pulled into something that I call cosmogenesis, which
Ooh.
has sort of 50 kind of huge paintings are on giant watercolor paper, so they're like 150 centimeters, which is like nearly 5 feet by 4 feet, and I make 5 or 6 at a time. So they're sort of downloads from the beginning of the universe. And I think that's also what being an artist allows, is that you can time travel through these portals.
Yes.
The information that's been coming through is like, it's so beyond what I, Suzette, can possibly know.
Yeah.
And I look at it, some of it, like cosmic eggs and the rainbow serpent, and even on one corner of a painting was the iris of an eye. And it's like this, I don't ever use a brush. I never direct the paintings. All I'm doing is using my body as a conductor.
Wow. That's
And
amazing.
what comes out is these kind of, conversation doesn't quite cover it, because it's not, it's a kind of body to body engagement with these kind of expansive energetic presences, um, that actually they speak through certain protocols.
Yeah.
So if you try to fiddle with them, they stop speaking. Like, so if you try to paint their, like eyelashes or something, it doesn't work, because the energy system is so huge.
Yeah.
You need to open your own gills in order to breathe with them.
Yeah,
Um,
there is a kind of, I find when I write like that, there is a kind of surrender, but
mhm.
it is still me and my
Absolutely.
relationship with that. But there is a surrender into something greater, a greater intelligence and knowing and understanding for it to come through.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's something about the acknowledgement, the mutuality in the acknowledgement, or that without that kind of recognition, and that's again why I think this perceptual, it's like recognizing this is not me, and only or alone.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
is
yeah.
so crucial for these downloads, whether they're through writing or painting, or
Yeah.
you know um, through music or dance, or that there's something about that shift that's so you have to make in order to recognize that we're not alone in this endeavor, and we never
Yes.
were.
It's interesting because so often, I hear scientists and other people refer to us as specks of dust on a planet in so many trillion galaxies of possible worlds. And I think when I do this, I no longer feel like a speck of dust.
Mm, yes,
It
yes.
changes the relationship because I feel like I have an experience of being part of that whole thing.
Mm,
Maybe not 200
yes.
trillion
Yeah,
galaxies or whatever there are,
yes,
but
yes, yes.
but
Yeah,
I
got to grow into that.
I feel like I can become that creative intelligence, at least for those moments.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
and it alters me.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's something for me in that my voice, my original fingerprint will never be repeated. And that sort of, so that mark of being both the kind of the individual or the unique being, it's probably the unique being
Yeah.
that also meets the kind of unique face of this creator intelligence that
Yeah.
has offered me some of the most profound encounters as a painter. And I felt in the face of that absolutely humbled by my existence and
Yes.
by the voice that I was given.
Yeah.
The
I get
voice,
that.
yeah, emanates from my body.
It's funny
Uh,
because a lot of it, there's no ego involved in it whatsoever.
mm,
It just dissipates. It's a whole different
yes,
version of yourself that
yeah,
exists, that's not identity and not ego based. But like you said, we're still unique. We're a unique
mm,
creative force that is partnering with this to bring something through. And it is an amazing thing.
mm.
Yeah.
It-
And I think that's a huge part of what's evolving us
yes,
at the moment.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And paradoxically, it's utterly different from the individualistic,
Yes.
materialistic kind of counterbalance that's rising its head in the world,
Yeah.
everywhere. Um, and I think it's a backlash against this deeper feminine consciousness that is rising,
Yeah.
you know, with through some people that is so exponentially exquisite, extraordinary. Like I really wanted to share with you this experience that I had. Would have been probably about 7 years ago. I took a break from teaching, and I was sitting in our garden in the studio at the bottom of the garden, and I literally, these size paintings I probably have, I don't know, at least 10,000,
Ooh,
if not. And there are boxes and boxes of them because it's been 25 years I've been practicing.
yeah.
Um, and I had some of them up in the studio, and I looked around the walls, and I had this profound sense of seeing at different points in the paintings I had on the wall how the hands shaped, how the hands changed. And I know that what I was seeing was not my hands.
Wow.
And in that moment of recognition, I heard, um, hundreds of hands have come through to you. And in that moment, I was like, I was so moved by the realization that hundreds of hands had reached through the veil, and this is really difficult for spirit to reach through to
Yeah.
direct these images in order to communicate.
Yeah.
And that was a moment that absolutely changed my practice
Yeah.
from kind of being not never sort of it's like, oh gosh, it's like, stop being so anodyne, stop trying to suppress what's actually happening here, and really accept that you are being helped from many dimensions. And these are these are actual hands. They
Wow.
are wanting to speak,
Yeah.
and not just to you. They're wanting to speak to
Yeah.
many, many people.
'Cause I do believe this is available to everybody.
Yeah, I
I know you
I'm with you.
came in like it. I did not come in like it. And because I didn't come in like it, I'm pretty sure anybody can access it,
Mm. Yes,
I guess
yeah,
it's like that for me. So yeah.
and totally, and anybody in any state
Yeah.
can access it.
Yes.
That creative healing is available, or creative nature is available to everyone. It's our birthright. And even if you cannot move your hands, you can invisibly lend your hands to somebody else to bring through
Yeah.
these paintings,
Yeah.
or sort of the words that you can transmit. There are many ways that we can enable other people who are not able to access their physical body
Yeah.
to bring their creation through.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, if people want to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
They can do it through my websites. I have two websites. One is SuzetteClough.com, suzette.com, and that's my painting website. And my teaching website is called visualmedicine.org. And
Fantastic.
visual medicine is my teaching practice, and it's what I teach to people. I'm just actually about to start teaching a course on the 5th of November called Painting with the Cosmos,
Mm,
which is absolutely about what we're talking about partnering with creation energies and
nice.
learning ways of stepping aside and stepping into these deep, embodied, relational conversations
Wow.
and
Amazing.
decoding the images that come through.
And, I think that each person that steps up to do this
Mm,
will have a unique orientation of what will come through them. So,
totally, totally.
that's what I love about it. I hope we never lose our
Yeah.
uniqueness
Yes,
as
yes,
well as our relationship with this emerging and creative intelligence that's just extraordinary,
yes,
So yeah, exciting. Wow.
yeah.
Ooh,
And that part of what you're saying is that part of that that creativity's language system is its uniqueness and
yeah,
its connectedness.
it is.
It,
Yeah,
it's both those things. It's like it's a signature of like a signature that comes from your cells
yeah,
and flows.
yeah. I would call it, I used to call it essence. I would now call it a source signature
Yes,
from kind of the
beautiful.
origins of
Yes,
you
yes.
that's got a particular orientation or purpose. And, I just want to say, I love the term cosmogenesis. And a
Mm,
friend of mine recently, when we were talking about the evolution of us all, talked about perpetual genesis. And it,
yes,
it kind of
beautiful.
feels like that to me at the
Yes,
moment,
yes.
like
Totally,
next, next,
totally.
next,
Yeah,
next, next.
yeah,
Like we're
yeah,
constantly becoming. It's
yeah.
such an exciting way to live and to be in the world. And I personally feel extraordinarily fulfilled in my life as a result of these relationships. Do you
Mm.
feel the same?
Absolutely. I feel I'm still carrying my personal shit. And I'm still kind of grappling with that. And also that I feel the depth of possibility. I feel like when you said perpetual birth, I feel like one of the things is I'm giving I'm being given birth to, I'm giving birth to myself, I'm birthing others, I'm
Yeah,
birthing ideas, that we're
yeah,
in a constant cycle of you know, kind of birth that is not always easy. And sometimes it's, I am literally kicking and screaming, no, not that. But but at the same time, I feel profoundly aware of this kind of the rightness, the pleasure, the
yeah,
privilege, the joy,
yeah.
and I feel also my woundedness. I feel them both together all the time.
Oh,
Um,
fantastic. I've lost that in myself. I've lost that part of
right,
the human endeavoring to do for
mm,
oneself. And I think what happened is I gave it up. I
right,
just surrendered, said,
right,
I
yeah,
don't need an identity. I'll just be whatever I'm becoming in each moment. And that
yeah.
made it easier for me somehow. So
I've had inklings of that. I don't think I'm not quite sure that I'm there yet. So
well, I think it's an adventure of
yes,
becoming.
absolutely.
And when I think, like you talked about joy just a minute ago, it's like I'm excited and I'm curious and I'm on an adventure and I just
Yes.
take the next piece, the next piece, the next piece, and it gives me great joy. And there's a lot of joy this year in people I
Mm,
find. It's really
yes.
exhilarated up big time this year. So yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you
It's
so much for that. So
it's
anybody who's watching, if you want to get in touch with Suzette around any of that, I love cosmogenesis. That sounds like a
yeah,
brilliant workshop you're about to do.
yeah,
So hope
yeah.
they'll find you on your
Well,
website.
it's actually an exhibition that I'll be having in November at my studio, mid-November.
Ooh,
So if you'd like to come, just sign yourself up on my mailing list and you'll get an invite.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Ooh, wonderful. Exciting. Okay, thanks very much for that. Thanks
Lovely.
everybody for listening.
Bye.